Today, let's talk about the 2021 iPad Pro, because this release was a pretty major overhaul since it gave us M1 and Mini LED to the iPad range. And so how has this aged on the whole? Well, let's talk about it. So spoiler alert guys, this has aged very well. But the same also applies to the 2020 iPad Pro and also the 2018 iPad Pro. Basically every version of the modern iPad design with the slimmer bezels and flat sides are still fantastic devices and do everything one needs from an iPad. Now yes, both the M1 and M2 were considerably more powerful on paper, but that power of course is really not being utilized by iPadOS. And while yes, there are apps like Procreate and Final Cut which can take advantage of the horsepower, the experience you get is still miles behind the Mac. But if you are on the market for an iPad Pro and you really need the M series benefits, you should absolutely get this over the M2 because this is no longer a brand new device and can often be found for much less, whilst offering 99% of the same experience. Because for example, design-wise, this looks identical to the M2 iPad Pro. Since 2020, in fact, there's really been no big design change. It still has the same camera module, the same flat sides, the same bezel size on the front, and so it means this iPad still looks fresh, even though it's nearly 3 years old. Only nerds will point out that the M2 models have iPad Pro written on the back instead of just iPads, but literally that's the only visual difference. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. Moving on to the display, this varies depending on the size option you go with, because if you get the 11-inch, you're gonna be stuck with the exact same LCD panel Apple's been using forever now. But that's actually not a bad thing because this display is still terrific in my opinion. Yes, the blacks are more greyish and it only offers 600 nits of brightness, but I can live with those compromises because the display otherwise is a joy to use and is great for content consumption, which is the primary use I buy an iPad for. The 120Hz refresh rate is the icing on the cake, and whilst I'm not a massive ProMotion nerd, it certainly is nice to have. But if you want the best display experience, then you'll have to shell out for the 12.9-inch size, because that exclusively got Mini LED, which is the same display the M2 12.9-inch has, and eventually the MacBook Pro's got. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when watching HDR content on this, you can undoubtedly see a difference in quality. The higher brightness especially makes a big difference, and so watching movies on this would be a treat, but I'll be honest, I can also live without it. I explained this in my recent video regarding the 2020 iPad Pro, but basically having used that with its basic LCD display, I would actually much rather get that instead because it's considerably cheaper yet offers the same benefits you would get with the larger size. I actually wasn't a massive fan of the 12.9-inch form factor initially, especially someone coming from the more compact 11-inch, but the extra real estate is actually quite nice, I can't lie. But anyways, coming back to my initial point, because the M1 model came with Mini LED and a price increase as a result, it's still floating for around $900/pounds, and I'm not gonna spend that much on a tablet I'm only using for content consumption, but I'll talk more about that a little later. Performance-wise, we of course have the M1 chipset with 8 gigs of RAM, you get 16 gigs on higher storage variants, and as one expects, this iPad basically flies through anything I throw at it. My usage has been pretty basic to be fair, as I said. This iPad for me is still just a tablet, and so if you're in the same boat, this truly is overkill. I guess the upside is that because there's so much headroom performance-wise, you can expect many years of updates, which is awesome, but I just wish we could take advantage of the power this has. What do I mean by this? Well, to be frank, I want to be able to boot macOS on this. At the end of the day, whilst iPadOS is perfect for tablet usage, like content consumption, reading books, checking on socials, etc., it really does suck for productive use. There are great apps on the iPad for creative workflows, but weird limitations with iPadOS stops me from using this as a laptop replacement, and so I've really given up on that dream altogether. But if Apple wanted to fix things, just giving us macOS would be awesome. Take for example multitasking. Stage Manager feels so much more inferior to use compared to multitasking on macOS. I feel like this point perfectly illustrates my issue with the iPads. Yes, you can technically open multiple windows at once and switch between them on the iPads, but it feels a lot clunkier and slower to use than macOS. and so for most consumers, getting a Mac for around the same price is the much better buy. Of course, I'm aware that Apple wants to keep the iPad and Mac separate, and so the chances of the iPad getting macOS at this point are basically nil. But because of the software limitations, I really have no choice but to use this iPad as a glorified Netflix machine. Now, what I say doesn't apply to everyone, because if you're a student who wants to write down notes for school or you're doing artwork, then of course, the iPad is going to be much better than a Mac for you. But even then, guys, I would probably settle for something even cheaper, because there's not going to be a big difference in terms of regular usage between this and older iPads. Yes, the M1 has some benefits over A-series iPads, like better desktop support, but I don't care. There are way too many things Apple needs to fix with iPadOS first, so till those things get resolved, I'm not going to be replacing my Mac with an iPad anytime soon. Anyways, moving to battery life, it has been pretty good. I did get this from Apple Refurb directly, so it came with a brand new battery inside, and so I've easily been getting 7 or 8 hours of screen on time. Now, what sucks for those buying used or through a third-party refurbished seller is, unfortunately, unlike other Apple products, you can't check battery health natively on the iPad. You will have to use a third-party program like Coconut Battery, but still, it would be much easier for those gambling on the used market for this to be baked in settings, so that you can easily ask the seller about the battery health on the device, so fix that immediately, Apple. Accessories wise, this does use the exact same keyboard and pencil Apple offers today with the M2 models, and they're both great. As I said, I'm not using this iPad as a laptop replacement. It is the keyboard to get if you do need one. The floating design is really nice, and it offers the same keyboard and trackpad experience Apple's offered on the Mac for years. So if you can find one for cheap, definitely consider it. The pencil has also remained unchanged for 6 years at this point, but to be honest, there really is nothing much that can change here, because it's a great accessory as is, and works brilliantly for the most part. And so again, the price has come down on this, so definitely consider one for artwork or note-taking, and do not buy the inferior USB-C pencil instead. Camera-wise, these sensors are pretty decent. The rear cameras actually are exactly the same as the M2. It's a 12 megapixel main with a 10 megapixel ultra-wide accompanied by a pretty useless LiDAR scanner. And I'll be honest guys, I rarely use the cameras. At most, I'll use the main camera to scan documents, but honestly, I would not even care if they downgraded the iPad Pro back to one camera, because I doubt most are actually taking photos on a regular basis with their iPad Pros. What still blows me away though is how well Center Stage works, which was introduced with this iPad, and it mostly makes up for the awkward position of the camera with its ultra wide field of view. You also get 4K video recording if you really need that, and one thing the iPad Pros only have is portrait modes. Because other iPads lack Face ID, which I'll get to by the way, this has the depth sensing tech for portraits, and it's pretty nifty, I can't lie, though I'm likely never gonna use this. And now let's talk about Face ID, because I'm still pretty conflicted about this. The positives are that it works very seamlessly, and that of course, I don't even have to think about unlocking the iPads. As soon as I wake up, it's ready to go, and that's awesome. But I do often find myself blocking the Face ID module when holding the iPads, and so overall I do still prefer Touch ID. I know I'm in the minority here for sure, but those are my thoughts. The audio here is also very impressive. As one expects when you have a large-ass iPad with quad speakers, it does make quite a racket, and so yes, these are very much class-leading for tablet speakers, and it's crazy how bassy these are because this iPad's hella thin. Mics are also very solid. There's actually 5 on the iPad Pros instead of 2 on the other iPad models, and here's a video mic test for you guys on the iPads. A few other small things I want to mention. This has a Thunderbolt port on the side, which is great if you want to transfer things onto this iPad from a hard drive, but then you realize you have to deal with the horrific files app, and so this yet again, guys, illustrates how the software still hasn't caught up with the excellent hardware of the iPad. this headline actually perfectly illustrates the state of the iPad in general. But anyways, you also get Bluetooth 5 support and Wi-Fi 6, which are the specs you would expect on a relatively modern iPad, and I've had zero issues in this aspect. You also get 5G with the cellular version if you really care about that, but to be honest, I would rather just save some cash and go for the Wi-Fi model and hotspot when needed. So overall guys, both the 11-inch and 12.9-inch M1 models are still great tablets today and are considerably cheaper than the very similar M2 models, which makes them easy recommendations if you're wanting a pro tablet. But it does still feel weird that 3 years later the potential of these products are yet to be realized by the software. So basically guys, if you don't care about some of the benefits M1 offers or the mini LED display, you should highly consider saving your cash and going for an older iPad Pro, or of course, getting the iPad Air 4 or 5 instead, which gives you a very similar experience at the end of the day. I mean, I'm likely going to return this and go back to a 2020 iPad Pro because the A12Z is still plenty powerful for my needs. I also don't need mini LED, and more importantly, it's considerably cheaper whilst offering a very similar experience. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.